A light spring rain clung to the sidewalks of Seattle the night Ethan Ward first saw her. People hurried past Aurora Grill umbrellas tilted against the drizzle, unaware of the tiny figure sitting alone under the awning. But Ethan noticed because the child wasn't just sitting there. She was waiting. Waiting as if her whole world depended on it, and when he finally stepped outside and asked her why, the answer hit him with a force he hadn't felt in decades. She said, "My mom told me to stay right here until she came back, but she didn't." Then she looked up at him, brave, exhausted, and 5 years old. It shattered him. It began at the end of a long day, the kind Ethan hadn't enjoyed in years, despite his wealth or the empire he'd built. The Aurora Grill was his pride, perched near Pike Place Market with a view of the water. He visited unannounced to keep standards high, but tonight he was restless for reasons he couldn't explain. Inside, everything was flawless, polished silver low, jazz, a full reservation list. Yet something felt off, and he noticed it the moment he glanced through the window. A little girl, alone, soaked sneakers, knees pulled tight to her chest, a plush rabbit tucked beneath her chin. He watched for a moment, thinking someone might join her. Instead, a gust of cold wind pushed her hair across her face, and she brushed it away with a small, practiced motion, too old for her age, too familiar with discomfort. That was the moment something inside him twisted. He stepped outside. She didn't flinch, but her small hands tightened around the rabbit's ears. "Hey there," he said, careful not to stand too close. "It's late, sweetheart. Why are you out here?" She blinked up, rain glittering on her lashes. "I'm waiting. For who? My mom." Ethan scanned the sidewalk, empty except for passing cars. "How long have you been waiting?" She looked down at the ground where small pebbles were lined in a neat row, each stone a different color. She tapped them one by one. 1, 2, 3, 4. She hesitated before tapping the last. 5 nights, 5 nights. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. "What's your name, Lila? That's a beautiful name." He crouched, slightly meeting her eyes. "Lila? Where's your mom now?" "She went to fix something," Lila said simply. "She told me to stay right here. She said this place was safe because the lights never go out." She lifted her chin toward the restaurant's golden glow, and she promised she'd come back. Moms don't break promises. Ethan swallowed hard. It had been a long time since he'd believed promises meant anything. He took in her thin jacket, damp from nights outside. The plush rabbit maple had stuffing showing through one seam, as if he'd been hugged too tightly for too many hours. Her fingers were red from the cold, but her posture remained stubbornly hopeful, like she was guarding the last good thing in her life. "Have you eaten?" Ethan asked. "I had crackers yesterday." She said it without complaint, like she was reporting the weather. "And where do you sleep?" Lila pointed to a narrow gap beside the stone planter. "There. Maple watches while I sleep. He doesn't blink." Ethan felt something stir inside him, an anger he hadn't felt since childhood. Not anger at her mother, not yet, but anger at whatever circumstance forced a little girl to count nights with stones. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "how about we wait for your mom somewhere warm inside?" "You don't have to stay out here," Lila shook her head quickly. "If I leave, she won't find me. And then I'll be lost forever." Her voice broke on the last word, though she hid it behind Maple's ear. Ethan knelt fully now, rain soaking through the knees of his tailored suit. "I promise you, if your mom comes back, I'll make sure she finds you. I'll leave word with everyone here. I'll even stay with you." "How does that sound?" Lila looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether grown-ups could still be trusted. Then she whispered, "People say things they don't mean." Ethan flinched at the truth of it, but he leaned in gently and said, "You're right. Most people do. but I'm not most people, and I won't let anything happen to you." Her small fingers loosened from Maple's ear. She studied Ethan's face with a seriousness far beyond her age. "Okay," she finally said. "But only if Maple can come too, of course." When he held out his hand, she stared at it hesitant, then placed her tiny hand in his, a fragile warmth that startled him. It felt like holding a promise he didn't know he was about to make. Inside the restaurant, staff paused, startled, as the billionaire owner walked in carrying a shivering 5-year-old in his arms. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't care about appearances, reputation, or the whispers that would follow. All he cared about was the small voice that had already carved its way inside him. "My mom will come back," Lila murmured as he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. And Ethan, who had spent a lifetime building walls, felt them crack in places he didn't know existed. Seattle's sky was a soft gray the next morning, the kind that made the whole city feel quieter, gentler. Ethan wasn't used to mornings like this, mornings that didn't start with conference calls, investor updates, or a line of people waiting for his approval. Instead, he found himself driving toward a modest building on the outskirts of the city, a place he had never heard of until last night, Harbor Haven Children's Shelter. Lila sat in the back seat, wrapped in the small blanket he'd given her. She held Maple tightly, her chin resting on the rabbit's head. Her eyes looked brighter after a night of real sleep, but there was a guardedness, a careful watchfulness, as if she feared that one wrong move might make everything she'd gained disappear. "You doing okay back there?" Ethan asked quietly. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the passing trees. "Are we going far?" "Just a few minutes away," he said. "It's a safe place." "Good people." She swallowed. "Will I have to stay there forever?" "No," he said firmly. "Just until we figure things out." He didn't add the truth. He had no idea how long that would be. A day, a week longer. All he knew was that the little girl behind him was now his responsibility, whether he had chosen it or not. Harbor Haven sat on a quiet residential street in Tacoma, with a yard full of chalk drawings and a red tricycle parked crookedly near the door. It didn't look like an institution. It looked like a place where someone had tried to make life softer. A woman with warm features and graying hair stood by the entrance. She wore a knitted cardigan and an expression that made people trust her before she even spoke. "You must be Lila," she said as they walked up. Her voice was gentle but certain, the kind that calmed nervous hearts. Lila stepped behind Ethan, gripping the hem of his coat. "This is Grace," Ethan explained. "She helps take care of kids." Grace crouched down so she wasn't towering over Lila. "I'm happy to meet you. I heard you had a really tough week." Lila didn't answer. Maple did the answering for her, pressed tighter against her chest. Grace didn't push. "Would you like to see where you'll stay? You can bring your rabbit. He's part of the family." Lila peeked out from behind Ethan. "He's not a rabbit. He's Maple." Grace smiled. "Maple is a wonderful name." Slowly, carefully, Lila stepped out. Ethan followed a few steps behind, feeling surprisingly protective. Inside, Harbor Haven was brighter than he expected. Walls painted in soft yellows and blues. Hand-drawn pictures taped everywhere. A scent of oatmeal cookies drifting from somewhere. Children's laughter echoed faintly from down the hall. Grace led them into a small room with 2 beds, each covered in cheerful quilts. Stuffed animals lined the windowsill. A bookshelf stood in the corner filled with colorful stories. "This will be yours for now," Grace said. "You'll have friends here, and you'll get warm meals every day." Lila walked to the window, touching the edge of the quilt with her fingertips. Do I get to keep all this?" "For as long as you stay," Grace answered. "And my mom, when she comes, will she know where I am?" Ethan stepped in before Grace could reply. I left a note at the restaurant, remember? I'll make sure your mom finds you. I promise. Lila turned to him, uncertainty flickering across her face. You'll come too. Right. It struck him hard how much she needed consistency, something firm to hold on to. Something she hadn't had in far too long. Yes, he said, I'll come. Grace nodded approvingly. We encourage visitors. Familiar faces help the children adjust. For the next hour, they completed intake paperwork. Grace asked questions with sensitivity medical history, allergies, daily routines. Lila sat beside Ethan answering softly when she could, shrinking into silence when she couldn't. When Grace asked what comforted her when she felt scared, Lila simply pointed to Maple. At the end, Grace asked, Do you have any emergency contacts, family, friends? Lila shook her head. Ethan answered instead. I'll put my information. Grace glanced at him surprised. You're not a relative, no. Her brows lifted. You're sure? Yes, Ethan said again more firmly. Put me down. Grace didn't question further, but something in her eyes softened as if she understood that whatever this connection was, it mattered. Later that afternoon, Grace took Lila to meet the other children in the playroom. The sound of chatter and building blocks filled the space. A boy about Lila's age approached her with a toy dinosaur. You want to play? Lila shook her head, hiding behind Maple. The boy shrugged and ran off. Lila's shoulders tightened, but no tears came. She simply retreated to a quiet corner and sat down, watching the room, as though studying a world she wasn't sure she belonged to. Ethan stood at the doorway, his heart pulling in conflicting directions. He wasn't family. He wasn't even supposed to remain in this story, yet he couldn't walk away. Grace approached him. Some kids take longer to join in, she said. She'll warm up when she's ready. She shouldn't be here. Ethan muttered the words slipping out. A child her age shouldn't be alone like this. Grace folded her hands. And yet many are. You did the right thing bringing her. It doesn't feel like enough. Grace studied him quietly. Most people drop a child off and disappear. You stayed. That matters. Ethan didn't respond. Words felt heavy. A few minutes later, Lila looked up from her corner and met his eyes. She didn't say anything, but she didn't look away either. Something in her gaze asked the same silent question she'd asked outside his restaurant. Are you really coming back? Ethan walked over. I have to go for a little bit, he told her gently. But I'll check on you tomorrow, I give you my word. Lila lowered her head. Everybody leaves. Not me, he said. She didn't reach for him, but she knotted her grip on Maple, tightening. As he walked toward the exit, Grace followed. Mr. Ward, she said softly. Children like Lila don't attach to people quickly. If she trusts you already, that's rare. And important. Ethan paused his hand on the door. I didn't plan for any of this. Life-changing things rarely come with warning, she replied. Outside, the rain had eased, but the air carried a chill that sank deep. Ethan stood on the steps of Harbor Haven, feeling as though he'd stepped into a story he hadn't meant to enter. But now that he was in it, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He wasn't walking away. The following morning, the city felt heavier than usual, as though Seattle itself sensed the unanswered questions hanging in the air. Ethan had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lila counting those 5 stones. He saw her clutching Maple, trying not to tremble. And he kept hearing the one sentence she said with absolute faith, My mom will come back. Faith that strong deserved the truth. He drove to his downtown office earlier than usual, not to work on the restaurant chain or check in with his executive teams, but to make a phone call he hadn't made in years. A call to someone he trusted with matters no one else ever saw. Caleb Rhodes. A former police detective turned private investigator, Caleb had a reputation for finding answers buried where people didn't want them found. He and Ethan weren't close, but they had worked together on a corporate extortion issue almost a decade earlier. Caleb was the kind of man who kept his word and his discretion. When he answered the phone, his voice was rough from sleep. "This must be serious." "You don't call before sunrise." "It is," Ethan replied. "I need to find someone, a woman. Her name is Marissa Hale." There was a brief pause. "Why, she's the mother of a young girl who's now in my care." Another pause, longer this time. "You adopting kids now?" "No," Ethan said sharply. "I'm trying to keep one from disappearing through the cracks." Caleb exhaled slowly. "All right, what do you know about her?" "Not enough," Ethan admitted. "Only a name. And that she told her daughter to wait outside Aurora Grill. Marissa never came back." Caleb's tone shifted to business. "Address, workplace, relatives." "We have nothing yet," Ethan said. "But I'll get the hotel security footage from businesses near the restaurant. And I need you to pull whatever records you can find on Marissa Hale. Employment history, known associates, anything that can help us understand where she was going." "Give me 2 hours," Caleb said, "and be ready. Missing person cases involving young single mothers rarely turn out simple." When the call ended, Ethan leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of every choice he had already made. He wasn't obligated to go this far. No one would blame him if he left this to social services or the police. But he kept seeing Lila's eyes, hopeful and afraid at the same time. He couldn't shake the memory of her voice trembling when she whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" He would not let this child wonder that for the rest of her life. By mid-morning, Ethan had pulled favors from several business owners along Pike Street. Seattle had security cameras on nearly every corner. He spent an hour reviewing grainy footage from each angle, his frustration mounting, until he heard a knock on his office door. Caleb stepped in, wearing a navy jacket and carrying a small folder. "You weren't exaggerating," he said. "This is complicated." Ethan stood. "What did you find?" Caleb handed him the folder. Inside were printouts, employment records, a partial address history, and a driver's license photo. Marissa Hale looked younger than Ethan expected. Mid-20s, dark hair, sharp cheekbones softened by a tired smile. "She's been working housekeeping jobs for years," Caleb said, "mostly in hotels around the Seattle and Tacoma area. The most recent one is the Evergreen Crown Hotel in Ballard. She clocked out the evening she disappeared and never clocked in again. Any family," Ethan asked, scanning the pages. "A mother who passed away 3 years ago. No siblings, no partner on record, no father listed on Lila's birth certificate." "So she's alone," Ethan murmured. "Yes," Caleb said. "And here's the part that worries me." He slid another sheet across the desk. It was a statement from one of Marissa's former co-workers. She mentioned someone following her, Caleb explained. A man who waited for her outside the hotel parking lot a few nights in a row. The co-worker didn't get a name, just said he drove a dark sedan and made Marissa nervous. Ethan felt a chill. "You think she was running from someone, I think she was scared," Caleb said. "And whatever happened the night she left her daughter at your restaurant might not have been a choice." Ethan tightened his jaw. "I need confirmation. I need to know what happened to her." Caleb nodded. "Then we start with the last place she was seen." They drove to the hotel in silence. The Evergreen Crown was a worn brick building, with a faded sign, the kind of place travelers chose when they needed something cheap and functional. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of old carpet and lemon cleaner. The manager, a tired-looking man in his 50s, looked startled to see the billionaire owner of Aurora Dining Group standing at his counter. "I'm here about one of your employees," Ethan said. "Marissa Hale." Recognition flickered. Quiet girl, always on time, polite, hard-working. He rubbed his forehead. "She didn't pick up her paycheck last month." Did she say anything unusual before she vanished? Ethan asked. The manager hesitated. She looked scared the last few days she worked here. Jumpy, kept watching the door. I asked once if everything was all right. She said she just needed to be careful. Careful of what Caleb pressed. The manager shook his head. She didn't say. Caleb leaned forward. Security cameras over there, the manager said, pointing to a monitor. They reviewed footage from the night Marissa disappeared. At 7:42 p.m., she stepped out through the side door, coat pulled tight, clutching a small purse. She kept glancing over her shoulder. Then a car pulled into view, a black sedan with obscured plates. Marissa froze, then hurried out of frame. The car followed. Ethan felt dread tighten in his chest. There. That's the vehicle. Caleb nodded grimly. Not random. Ethan exhaled hard. Whatever happened, Lila deserves the truth. And Marissa deserves to be found. Caleb closed the laptop. Then we keep going. I'll canvass nearby businesses for additional footage. You talk to the shelter, see if Lila remembers anyone or anything else. Sometimes kids notice details adults miss. Ethan knew he would do more than that. He would return to Harbor Haven today. He needed to see Lila, needed to check in, needed reassurance that she was all right. When they stepped outside, the afternoon sun briefly peeked through the clouds. Seattle felt too calm, too ordinary for what they had just uncovered. Caleb turned to Ethan. You're in this, aren't you? Not just helping. Committed. Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes, I'm not walking away from her. Caleb studied him. Then, let's find the truth before someone else gets hurt. As Ethan watched the investigator walk off, he realized something he hadn't admitted until now. This wasn't just a search for answers. It was a fight for a child who had already been forgotten by too many people, and he would not be one of them. Caleb's call came just after sunrise, his voice lower than usual, carrying a weight that made Ethan sit up straight. I found her, he said. You need to get to Harborview Medical Center. Now. Ethan didn't ask questions. He grabbed his keys and was out the door within minutes, the streets of Seattle blurring past as he drove. A knot tightened in his chest, not dread exactly, but something colder. Something that told him the answers he'd been chasing were about to hurt far more than he expected. Harborview's sliding doors opened into a world of bright lights and quiet urgency. Nurses moved briskly through hallways. Machines beeped behind closed curtains. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain-soaked clothing. Caleb waited near the elevator's, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Where is she? Ethan demanded. Caleb motioned him down the hall. ICU, room 214. Before we go in, you need to brace yourself. For what, Caleb stopped, turned to face him. This wasn't an accident. She fought someone, hard, and whoever she was running from didn't back off until she was already hurt. Ethan felt the floor shift beneath him. She's alive, barely, Caleb said. But she's holding on. They reached the doorway. Through the glass panel, Ethan saw a woman lying motionless on a hospital bed surrounded by wires and IV lines. Her face was bruised, her arm in a cast, her ribs tightly wrapped. She looked impossibly young and impossibly fragile. Marissa Hale. The mother a little girl had been waiting for in the rain. Ethan stepped inside slowly. Machines hummed softly. A heart monitor beeped with uneven rhythm. A doctor approached him, a tall woman with tired eyes and a voice softened by long nights. You're Mr. Ward, she asked. Caleb said you've been looking for her. Are you family? He hesitated. No, but her daughter is in my care. The doctor's expression warmed. Then you deserve to know what happened. She suffered significant trauma, broken ribs, internal bleeding, a concussion. But the most telling injury is this. She lifted Marissa's hand gently, revealing deep bruising across the knuckles, as if she had struck something again and again. She fought like hell, the doctor said. There were signs of a struggle found near the road where she was picked up. Someone tried to drag her toward a vehicle. She resisted until she couldn't anymore. Ethan felt anger rise like a tide. Is she conscious? Not yet. But there's brain activity. She may wake with time and care. He moved closer, studying Marissa's face. Her breathing was shallow but steady. A small scrape along her temple made her look even younger. You didn't abandon her, Ethan whispered, feeling heaviness in every word. You were trying to protect her. Caleb stepped beside him. We found the car. It belongs to a man with a long record: assault, coercion, suspected trafficking. He's been off the radar, but this ties him to a new crime. I've already passed everything to SPD. They'll handle it from here. Ethan nodded absently, still focused on Marissa. She tried to save her daughter. Alone. And she succeeded, Caleb said quietly. Lila is safe because she bought her that time. A soft knock came from the doorway. Grace from Harbor Haven entered, her expression warm but full of worry. How is she? She asked. Hanging on, Ethan said. And Lila Grace's shoulders softened. She woke early. She asked if you meant what you said about visiting her today. Ethan closed his eyes. I did, and I will. Grace hesitated. Do you want to tell her about her mother? Not yet, Ethan said. I want something certain before I give her hope. Grace nodded. She'll understand you're trying to protect her. After she left, Ethan took a quiet moment in the room. He rested a hand on the rail of Marissa's bed, feeling the cold metal under his palm. You've been fighting alone for a long time, he murmured. You don't have to anymore. Hours later, while Ethan was making arrangements with the hospital's legal department, paperwork, consent forms, financial guarantees, he received an urgent page from the ICU. Marissa was awake. He returned to room 214 to find her eyes partially open, unfocused but searching. The doctor stood nearby. She's drifting in and out, the doctor said softly, but she's trying to communicate. Ethan moved to the bedside. Marissa? It's Ethan Ward, I'm here. Her gaze flickered weakly toward him, recognizing neither the man nor the name. He leaned in, speaking slowly, hoping his voice might cut through the haze. I found your daughter, Lila. She's safe. She's being cared for. Marissa's breath hitched and tears gathered in the corners of her eyes. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. A nurse brought water, moistening her lips. Her voice came out in a soft, broken whisper. Lila. Safe. She's okay, Ethan said firmly, and she misses you. Marissa's hand trembled, reaching weakly toward him, not for comfort but for confirmation. He held it gently. I won't let anything happen to her, he promised. Her fingers tightened, slightly desperate. Don't let him find her. We won't, Ethan said. He won't get near her again. Marissa blinked, slowly, exhaustion overtaking her. But before drifting back to sleep, she whispered one more thing, a sentence so unexpected it stopped Ethan's breath. You're the man she told me about. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Marissa swallowed, eyes fluttering open for a moment. Years ago, you fed me. At your restaurant, I never forgot your kindness. Ethan went still. The memory flickered, half-faded, buried beneath years of success and routine. A young woman, hungry and embarrassed, refusing to accept a free meal, but accepting a warm one. A fleeting moment he hadn't thought about since. You changed everything that night, Marissa whispered. You made me believe there were still good people in the world. Emotion rose in Ethan's chest, sharp, unexpected, humbling. He had no words. Marissa's eyelids lowered again. Please take care of her. I will, he said quietly. That's a promise. As she drifted back into sleep, the room felt different. now heavy not with fear, but with something else, something deeper. This wasn't just a search anymore. It was a second chance given unexpectedly, woven through two lives that had once crossed without either of them knowing how much it would matter. And Ethan understood with absolute certainty that he wasn't done fighting for this family. Not by a long shot. Recovery came slowly for Marissa, the kind of slow that tested patience and faith. Weeks passed inside Harborview's quiet halls as she regained strength. First, learning to sit upright, then to stand, and finally to walk again. Through it all, Ethan was there sometimes in the doorway, sometimes sitting beside her bed, sometimes just standing guard in the hallway when she needed rest. He never said it out loud, but everyone around him understood he wasn't leaving these two. When Marissa was finally cleared to leave the hospital, she and Lila were reunited in the lobby. Lila ran into her mother's arms with a force that made every nurse tech and passerby pause. Marissa knelt to catch her, still wincing from healing ribs but refusing to let go. "You came back," Lila whispered, her face buried against her mother's shoulder. "I always would," Marissa said, her voice thick. "I fought to get back to you." Ethan watched the moment quietly. There was nothing performative about it. No dramatic speeches, no grand gestures. Just a mother and daughter whole again after nearly being shattered forever. He felt something inside him settle like a door he'd been holding shut for years, finally eased open. With Caleb's evidence, police moved swiftly. The man who had stalked Marissa was found hiding near the industrial docks. He didn't go quietly, but he went. The case was passed to the county prosecutor. Grace kept Ethan updated on every step. Justice wasn't quick, but it was real. Once the immediate danger was gone, Ethan focused on something more delicate, rebuilding a life. He arranged for Marissa and Lila to move into a safe apartment near Green Lake, a quiet neighborhood with kind neighbors and a community that looked out for each other. It was modest, but warm, with sunlight pouring through the windows in the afternoon, and enough space for Lila to scatter toys everywhere without anyone complaining. The first night there, Ethan brought dinner from Aurora Grill. Not the fancy kind, served on white porcelain plates, but the kind he made for staff on late nights: roasted chicken-buttered rolls, mashed potatoes, and the chocolate mousse that always made people smile no matter how hard their day had been. They sat at their small kitchen table, Lila swinging her legs, Maple perched beside her ears, worn from weeks of clutching. Marissa looked fragile, but present, her eyes clearer than they'd been since the attack. "You didn't have to do all this for us," she told Ethan. "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." She studied him for a moment. "People don't usually show up like this." "Maybe they should," he replied quietly. A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but thoughtful, as though both were recognizing the start of something they couldn't yet name. It was Lila who broke it. "Mom, can we show him the jar?" Marissa nodded, smiling softly. Lila jumped up and grabbed a small glass jar from the counter. It was filled with neatly folded slips of paper, some white, some pink, one bright blue. "What's this?" Ethan asked. "It's our promise jar," Lila said proudly. "We write promises so we don't forget them," Marissa explained. "It started in the hospital. Lila was scared I'd forget things when I woke up, so she asked if we could write down all the promises we make to each other, big or small." Lila held the jar out to Ethan. "You can write one too, if you want." He hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because promises had always been a complicated subject for him. In his world, promises were either broken or forgotten. But here, with these two, they felt different. They felt like something that could actually last. He took one of the slips and paused with the pen. "What kind of promise should I make?" Lila shrugged. "Any promise, you mean?" He looked at her, this child who had waited outside his restaurant for days, who trusted him before he understood why. who counted stones instead of hours. Then he looked at Marissa, who had fought with everything she had to protect her daughter, and who once remembered a small kindness from a stranger because it gave her hope on a night when she had none. He wrote slowly, deliberately, then folded the slip and placed it in the jar. Lila's eyes lit up. "What did you write?" He smiled. "Something true." Over the next few months, their rhythms formed naturally. Ethan visited regularly, sometimes to drop off groceries, sometimes just to sit with Lila while Marissa attended physical therapy. Other times, he invited them to special nights at Aurora Grill nights, reserved for friends and family of the staff, where the lights were softer and laughter replaced the usual hum of business. During one of those evenings, as Lila sat drawing at the table with Maple beside her, Marissa leaned toward Ethan. "You know, you gave me a second chance," she said. "You did that yourself," he replied. She shook her head. "No. You gave me the time I needed to get back to her. You gave Lila stability. You gave us safety. I'm not sure how to thank someone for that." He took a breath. "You don't have to." She looked at him closely, as if trying to read something beyond the surface. "Lila adores you," she said softly. He glanced toward the little girl watching her hum while she drew flowers across her napkin. "I adore her too." "Then maybe that's enough," Marissa said. Later that night, as they walked out into the cool Seattle evening, Lila reached for Ethan's hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his with absolute certainty. "You're not leaving, right?" she asked. He crouched so he was eye level with her. "No, sweetheart." "I'm here. For how long?" "For as long as you need me," he said. "That's a promise." She nodded, as though she'd known that answer all along, then slipped her hand into his again, completely trusting. As they walked together, the three of them, Ethan realized something profound. He hadn't simply helped reunite a family. He had become part of it. Not by blood, not by obligation, but by choice. And sometimes the people we choose become the family we were meant to find all along. When we look back on everything Ethan, Lila, and Marissa endured, their story reveals itself not as a tale of tragedy, but as a journey shaped by courage, unexpected grace, and the quiet power of human connection. It began on a rainy Seattle night with a little girl sitting alone on a cold sidewalk counting the days in stones and clutching a worn rabbit named Maple. A child who had no reason to trust anyone suddenly found herself face to face with a man who had spent most of his adult life believing he was better off alone. That chance encounter born from worry instinct and the simple act of noticing changed every life involved. Ethan stepped into the story as a stranger. A billionaire with a sharp mind and a guarded heart, he had built an empire out of discipline and control. But what he found that night outside Aurora Grill wasn't something he could fix with money power or influence. He found a child whose entire world rested on a single promise that her mother would come back for her. And when that promise hung by a thread, Ethan did something he hadn't done in years. He cared deeply, instinctively, without hesitation. Lila, too young to understand the full danger she'd escaped, displayed a resilience that humbled everyone around her. She carried hope like a lantern, refusing to let it go even when fear crept in at the edges. She trusted slowly, then wholeheartedly, reminding Ethan what it felt like to be needed in a way no business or achievement ever could. Her simple questions, her quiet bravery, her stubborn belief in goodness, those became the compass points guiding Ethan through choices he never expected to make. And Marissa, a mother who endured more than anyone, should fought for her daughter with every ounce of strength she had. Her survival was not just physical. It required emotional endurance, choosing to believe in safety after danger, in stability after chaos, and in kindness after cruelty. When she finally woke, the first words she managed to form were about Lila's safety, proving that love sometimes speaks loudest in whispers. Together, these three people, unlikely allies, strangers by circumstance but bound by need, formed something that looked a lot like family. Not a perfect one, not a traditional one, but a chosen one. Their story reminds us that family is not always defined by blood or paperwork. Sometimes it is written in small moments: a meal shared, a promise kept, a hand held when the world feels uncertain. It grows from showing up, not because you have to, but because something inside you insists that it's the right thing to do. For all of us living in a fast, overstimulated world, this story is a reminder to slow down and look closer, to notice the people who might be quietly struggling, to intervene when our hearts nudge us, even if it feels inconvenient, to extend compassion even when we're not sure it will matter, because often it matters more than we know.